They didn't notice when your voice began to quiet. They didn't notice when your eyes stopped searching theirs for reassurance, when your texts grew shorter, when your good morning turned into silence, when the warmth in your laughter faded into a tired kind of strength. No, they didn't notice then, because they thought you'd never leave. They thought your heart was the kind that forgives forever, that your love would keep showing up, even while they stayed hiding, that you would always bend, always reach, always wait, even if they gave you nothing to hold on to. And for a while you did, because your heart is loyal, not in a performative way, but in a sacred one. You believed in them. You saw them, not just the version they showed the world, but the soul beneath, the wounded child behind the armor, the softness in their eyes that flinched when things got too real. And you stayed, not because it was easy, but because you understood their pain. But there's only so long a person can fight to be seen without going blind. Only so long someone can give without being met, before love begins to feel like self-abandonment. So one day, quietly, softly, you began to let go, not with drama, not with threats, not with games, but with the kind of stillness that only comes when the soul realizes it deserves peace more than potential. And that's when they noticed. Not when you were begging, not when you were hurting, not when you were still trying to fix what they kept breaking. They noticed the moment you stopped, the moment your energy no longer reached for them, the moment your silence became more powerful than your words. The moment they realized they weren't being chased anymore, and suddenly, the absence they once craved became unbearable. The freedom they claimed to need now felt like a sentence, because what they thought was strength, their detachment, their coolness, their distance, was actually a wall that kept you out, but also kept them alone. Now, they sit with the weight of what they didn't fight for. And it hurts in a way they can't name. Not just because you're gone, but because you were the one who stayed when they gave you every reason not to. You were the one who loved them gently through their chaos. You were the one who offered grace instead of punishment, presence instead of pressure. You were the one who believed in them before they believed in themselves. And now they realize you were the one they should have fought for. But the war is over, and the battlefield is empty, because you no longer bleed for people who never learned how to hold what you gave freely, the psychology of their avoidance and neglect. They weren't cruel in the obvious ways. No yelling, no slamming doors, no betrayal you could point to and say, "This is why I'm hurting." No, their neglect was quieter. It came as emotional absence, delayed replies, shallow conversations when you needed depth, excuses masked as busyness, walls disguised as boundaries. And the most confusing part? They claimed to care. Sometimes they even said they loved you. But love without presence is a paradox, and promises without effort are empty. Still, a part of you believed they weren't trying to hurt you. You saw the way their eyes softened when they let their guard down. The way they listened, not often, but deeply, when they were fully there. The way they held your hand with hesitation, like it meant more than they could say. So what was it? Why did someone with a good heart treat your love like it was disposable? The answer, painful as it is, lies in fear. Not fear of you, but fear of being fully seen. Fear of intimacy. Fear of needing someone who might one day leave, like all the others did. Because somewhere deep in their history, they learned that closeness wasn't safe, that being vulnerable led to punishment, that needing someone meant giving away control. Maybe they were the child who reached for comfort and found coldness, the one who cried and was told to toughen up, the one who learned to survive by disconnecting from feelings, from others, from themselves. Carl Jung once wrote, "People will do anything no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. That's what they were doing. You didn't scare them. Your love didn't scare them. But what it reflected did. You reflected back everything they tried to suppress, the parts of themselves they buried to survive. And that's why they didn't choose you fully. Because choosing you would have required choosing themselves, their whole self, even the broken, wounded, terrified parts. So instead, they avoided. They pulled back when you got too close. They sabotaged the safety you offered. They numbed the connection, then blamed the silence. It was never about you being too much. It was about them not feeling enough. And the tragedy? You were never asking them to be perfect. You weren't demanding certainty or control. You were just asking for presence, for truth, for honesty, even if it was messy. But their default was to protect, not connect, to defend, not disclose, to keep you at just enough distance that they wouldn't get hurt, even if it meant hurting you instead. And now, with you gone, with your warmth no longer holding space for their silence, they're left to face the very thing they ran from all along. The emptiness behind their armor, the silence they called strength, the loneliness they created in trying to feel safe. Because the truth is, they didn't neglect you because you weren't worthy. They neglected you because they didn't believe they were. The unfolding consequence, what they feel now. At first, they felt relief, freedom, space, silence. They told themselves this was for the best, that you were too much, that things were getting complicated, intense, that they needed time to think, to breathe. They convinced themselves that walking away, or letting you walk, wasn't really a loss, that if it was meant to be, it would circle back on its own, that someone like you would always be waiting. But that illusion cracked slowly, not in some grand, cinematic moment, but in the quiet after work, the empty bed, the birthdays and Sundays and rainy mornings. When they expected your voice and got static instead, your absence wasn't loud. It was echoing. They scrolled through photos they pretended not to miss, saw your smile in places that used to feel like home, replayed old voice notes they told themselves they'd deleted, watched your life move on, gracefully, without bitterness, and wondered, did I matter at all? But of course, they knew the answer. Because it wasn't that you didn't care. It's that you stopped trying to prove it. And that is when regret began to bloom. Not just regret over losing you, but over who they were when they had you. You held up a mirror, and they couldn't face what they saw. Not then, but now? Now they see the moments they shrugged you off when you needed comfort. The way you tried to explain your feelings, and they rolled their eyes. The nights you cried, and they turned away, not out of cruelty, but cowardice. And slowly, the story they told themselves, that you were too emotional, too demanding, too intense, starts to sound hollow. Because the truth always echoes back, eventually. And now they sit with it, that you asked for so little, just consistency, honesty, presence. And they couldn't even offer that. That you forgave what others would have walked away from, and they still made you feel like you were asking too much, that you saw the good in them, even when they couldn't. And now, without your reflection, they're left with the parts of themselves they kept hidden, the shame, the fear, the selfishness dressed as detachment, the indifference that was really insecurity. They feel it in the small things, in the song that comes on and reminds them of the way you danced in the kitchen, in the places you used to go, now empty, even when crowded, in the silence that no longer feels peaceful, but punishing. They may not say it out loud. They may never admit it. But inside they know, you didn't just leave. You left because they gave you nothing to stay for. And that truth, that realization, It stings in ways they'll never fully articulate. Because now they understand. They didn't just lose a lover. They lost a mirror, a sanctuary, a once-in-a-lifetime kind of love they weren't ready to receive. And it's too late to turn back. Your strength and the power of letting go. Letting go wasn't something you did lightly. You didn't walk away in anger. You didn't slam the door. You didn't try to make them feel what they never made space to feel themselves. You simply stopped shrinking. You stopped performing for their approval. Stopped bleeding just to prove your love. Stop turning your own needs into something negotiable. Because one day, something deeper in you woke up. Not out of pride, not out of spite, but out of the quiet grief of always showing up for someone who never truly met you halfway. That's the moment everything changed. Not when you said goodbye, but when you said, I deserve to be loved without having to earn it every day. They didn't believe you'd do it. Didn't think you had it in you to detach. Because your love had been so constant, so forgiving, so patient. But they forgot something. Stillness doesn't mean weakness. Softness isn't the same as surrender. And choosing peace over chaos is the most courageous thing someone with a tender heart can do. You didn't leave to hurt them. You left because you could finally feel yourself dissolving in the process of loving someone who only knew how to take. You left to honor the version of you that had been abandoned long before they ever came along. The part of you that kept trying to earn love through overgiving, through being the fixer, the healer, the one who never gives up. But healing taught you something powerful. Love is not proven through pain. And no matter how much potential you saw in them, you couldn't carry both of your souls anymore. You became the version of yourself they never thought you'd become. The version who stops explaining her worth. The version who walks away without the need for closure. The version who stops chasing people afraid to be caught. And it confused them, shook them, left them wondering if you ever loved them at all. But deep down they know. They just never expected that one day you'd choose yourself. They thought you would always be available, always stay the same. But love, when met with silence, begins to speak inward. And that voice, your inner voice, finally got louder than your longing. You stopped loving them at the expense of yourself. And in doing so, you reclaimed your power. Not the kind that screams, but the kind that simply no longer waits. You are not bitter. You are not broken. You're just done participating in stories where your pain is ignored and your presence is treated as guaranteed. And that is strength. The ultimate truth. You were the gift they couldn't receive. They've replayed it all in their mind. The way you showed up, day after day. The softness in your voice, even when you were hurting. The way you remembered the little things. The way your love never asked them to perform, only to be real. And now, in the silence they once craved, they see it. You weren't asking for too much. You were offering everything, but they couldn't receive it. Not because it wasn't beautiful, but because it terrified them. See, love like yours doesn't just comfort, it confronts. It reveals every place someone hasn't healed. It reflects the parts of them they've spent years hiding from. You didn't trigger their fear of rejection. You triggered their fear of being seen. Because real intimacy doesn't allow for masks. It requires presence, vulnerability, accountability. And they weren't ready. They weren't ready to be held in the light of your honesty. They weren't ready to feel safe, because safety felt foreign. They weren't ready to meet you with open hands, because they've only ever known how to grasp, to guard, to ghost. So they pushed you away. And now, they missed the very thing they feared. But the deeper truth? They didn't just lose someone they loved. They lost the chance to grow, to heal, to choose the unfamiliar path of depth over detachment. Because you weren't just another person. You were the lesson, the mirror, the sacred invitation to finally love and be loved for real. And now that you're gone, they realize you were the safe place they prayed for and rejected when it arrived. You were the calm in their chaos, the warmth in their coldness, the presence in their distance. And they let it slip away, not because it wasn't real, but because they weren't ready to believe they were worthy of it. But here's what matters now. You didn't lose. You didn't fail. You loved fully. You stayed soft in the face of their silence. You offered truth in a world obsessed with performance. You were the gift they couldn't receive. And their inability to hold you does not define your worth. It defines their readiness. Let them remember you in moments of quiet. Let them feel the ache of what they discarded. Let them search for pieces of you and others and find only echoes. You're not there anymore. You've moved forward, not because you stopped loving, but because you finally started loving yourself. And one day, if they ever grow enough to face their shadow, they will remember the one they lost when they weren't ready to rise. And they will know. They realized too late. You were the one they should have fought for. So if you've ever been made to feel like you were hard to love, if you've ever been neglected, overlooked, or left holding the emotional weight alone, know this. You didn't ask for too much. You just asked the wrong person to meet you in your depth. Your love was never the problem. Your softness was never a flaw. And your leaving was never abandonment. It was survival. If this spoke to something deep inside you, subscribe, stay close, and let's keep growing together. You deserve love that sees you and stays.